You've been my friend for so long. You were right and I was wrong. I can repay all the love you've given me. You were my friend when no one cared. I was alone, but you were there. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I owe it all to you, Lord. All I have is yours, Lord. Take my life and make me what you'd have me be. I'm your child and you're my father. I'm the clay and you're the potter. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Borrowed treasures, borrowed dreams, all life's joys you've given me. When troubles come, you're always there to make me smile. So come what may, thy will be done. I love you, Jesus, God's only Son. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. For every time I have failed, each time I stumbled and sin prevailed, you pick me up and put my feet on solid ground. Why you should love me, I don't know, but I'll keep singing as I go, that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I owe it all to you, Lord. All I have is yours, Lord. Take my life and make me what you'd have me be. I'm your child and you're my father. I'm the clay and you're the potter. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I owe it all to you, Lord. All I have is yours, Lord. Take my life and make me what you'd have me be. I'm your child and you're my father. I'm the clay and you're the potter. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Lord, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Guys, let's do that. I know we're planning it tomorrow. My wife said, "What if you did that song?" I thought, okay. You guys have the words though? Miss Nina's got it. Lord is so good, isn't he? We're just gonna take a little time and as we get, I know it's Thursday night and some of you have work tomorrow. Those of you who can come, we have breakfast at 9 and the service at 10. And just, I mean, I'm excited. It blesses my heart to see these young people and as they grow and man, it stirred my heart. And they invited me to sing with them this one. Struggling through, help me out here. Someone get me. Struggling through my life and the choices I had made, looking to the right and left, trying to find my way, coming to a crossroad where I caught a glimpse of him, the Savior reaching out to me with hands that bore my sin. Well, no greater love was shown than on the cross of Calvary. I decided then and there that the choice was clear to me. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus every time. He means more to me than the world you see. There's no question in my mind. I'll take Jesus every time. What if opportunity should rise up like the sun and shine so bright on all the promises of what I could become? Luring hands of compromise could offer wealth and fame, tempting me to turn around, denying Jesus' name. Well, I'd rather be a poor man and have riches in the truth. So without a second thought, let me tell you what I do. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus every time. He means more to me than the world you see. There's no question in my mind. I'll take Jesus every time. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus. I'll take Jesus every time. He means more to me than the world you see. There's no question in my mind. I'll take Jesus every time. He means more to me than the world you see. There's no question in my mind. I'll take Jesus every time. I'll take Jesus every time. Thank you. Thank you. Every time. Every single time. All right, duties, can you come up and sing us a song? Good catch. We were planning on doing that tomorrow night, but the Lord is so good to us. You see, it's a lot more than just, we have got some substance to our religion. We've got, and the substance is the Word of God, and it means something to us. It's real. It's real.
Consider the lilies, they don't toil nor spin, and there is not a king with more splendor than them. Consider the sparrows, they don't plant or sow, but they're fed by the Master who watches them grow.
May I introduce you to this friend of mine who hangs out the stars, tells the sun when to shine, and kisses the flowers each morning with dew. But he's not too busy to care about you. We have a heavenly Father above, with eyes full of mercy and a heart full of love. He really cares when your head is bowed low. Consider the lilies, and then you will know. Consider the lilies, and then you will know.
More than what's being
If I could say one thing, it'd be he's the best thing. If I had only one word, Jesus would be heard. If I had but one breath, I'd use it to praise him with. If this were my last day, I'd shout Jesus all the way. If this were my last mile, I'd spend it praising him a while. If I had but one breath, I'd use it to praise him with. For he is really all that matters when this thing is over. We've crossed as cold waters. We'll see more clearly. We'll see that really he's in. If he hadn't loved me like he does, I wouldn't be. If he hadn't saved me, I'd suffer through eternity. If I had but one breath, I'd use it to praise him with. For he is really all that matters when this thing is over. We've crossed as cold waters. We'll see more clearly. We'll see that really he's in. For he is really all that matters when this thing is over. We've crossed as cold waters. We'll see more clearly. We'll see that really he's in. We'll see more clearly. We'll see that really he's in.
Realize how fortunate you are when you have great singing like that. There's nothing worse than going to a steak place and having a rotten salad. are bad appetizers. It kind of sort of sets your mind to think to yourself, well, if the salad and the appetizers are that bad, is the steak going to be worth staying around for, kind of thing? Not that I'm the steak, I'm just saying it's really a blessing when the appetizers make the main meal shine, and the main meal comes from the book. I appreciate what Brother Knowles had to say. He had a lot to say in a little time. I have a little to say, but it'll take me a long time. I'm going to take all the oxygen the Lord will give me, and I'm going to give as much of it out as I possibly can, and hope that He'll give me some more. If you'd like to, you can turn, if you're in your Bibles, but it's going to be a little while before we get there, to one of the most difficult passages in the Bible for me to fully understand. I want to try to preach to you, talk to you, just spend some time with you tonight about something that's badly needed in all of our lives. And all of us know the things that immediately come to your mind. They begin to fall into place like a tumbler in a good safe, and you begin to click the right combination, and the tumblers fall and the doors open. And so we need to stop this and stop this and stop this and stop this and start this and start this and start this and start this. But what if I could give you something tonight that seems to be a key to that stuff almost happening automatically? Wouldn't it be a blessing if I didn't have to work so hard at being what the Lord wants me to be? Wouldn't that be a blessing? I mean, salvation is instantaneous, right? But it seems to be that I oftentimes work against myself, right? I realize we got problems with the brethren. We have problems with the hemorrhoids in the church. We have problems with all. I understand all of that. But I'm saying that the biggest problem that we often have is the one we look at in the mirror all the time. You know, the thing that started war in heaven was pride, right? And then on the top 6 of the things, yea, 7 doth the Lord hate. A proud look makes the top number 1 thing in the list. And in James chapter number 4, he says, humble yourselves in the sight of God, not in the sight of the Bible-believing brethren, because we have a way of knowing how to look humble when we're really not humble, because we're really trying to look humble so we'll be exalted by the brethren. And he says, humble yourself in the sight of God, and He will lift you up. He will exalt you, right? But in that passage right there, you know what he says? He said, there's a way that I can have God to resist me. God resisteth the what? That's written to Christians. That's not just written to the devil. That's not just written to people that are out in the world. That's something that is part of human nature that is just as natural as waking up in the morning. Every one of our problem is, now I realize, we'll be careful how we say that. I'm kind of proud of the job I've done and the work I've done and the house I have and the wife or the husband I have or the kids or whatever, but that's like acceptable pride, right? But in the Bible, the Lord doesn't care for pride at all. As a matter of fact, He seems to lean Himself toward brokenness. See, it's an odd thing, because broken but valuable, that's where we're going tonight. It's a twisted way of looking at things. In the world, the way the world looks at it, the more whole you are, the more strong you are, the more successful you are, the better a utensil you are to the rest of the world. But the Lord said, no, the more broken you are, the more valuable you are. And yet we as Christians, more often than not, resist that brokenness because we don't want to be broken. Let me say this at the onset, if I could please. I don't believe God wants to intentionally have to break you. I know whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth and scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. But can I say this? You got the whipping because you did something you shouldn't have done. And so it's a result, as Brother Knowles already told you, it's the result of what you did. But one of the things that's in the Bible that you're looking at there in Mark chapter number 14 is one of the most unusual things in the Bible. Now, I go back in the Bible and in my mind's eye, just to run through a couple, I think about Joseph. Who would have thought the coat of many colors and dreaming the dreams and doing all those other things? And then he's broken up by a family situation there. He's sold into slavery, and then he goes down there after being sold into slavery. He comes out of a pit, and then he goes down to Potiphar's house, and then he gets lied about down there. And man, if anything will break you quicker, it's when somebody's telling you or accusing you of doing something you didn't do. They have a preconceived notion or they have an agenda, and so they throw you under the bus because it's to their benefit. It allows them to escape with their hide. And so you know what winds up happening? He winds up down in the prison, and then before long he winds up there in front of the king there, in front of Pharaoh, and you know the rest of the story. But he didn't get used until he got broken. You know, I look at Elijah, and there's a few things that is said about Elijah. Most of us know he's a Tishbite. He's there by the brook Cherith, and the Lord takes him out there. He preaches a real short message and goes over. The Lord takes care of him for 3.5 years. Pretty much, really, not a lot to say much about during that 3.5 years. And then he comes out and he eats the biscuit, and then he goes in there and eventually brings the woman's son back to life after he had passed away there. And he goes in there and has the showdown there on the top of Mount Carmel and calls down fire from heaven. And you know what? That's about all you read about him until all of a sudden you see him under a juniper tree. And he's broken. That old prophet is broken. That's probably the greatest old prophet in the Old Testament. You know what? God wasn't done using him. He goes on 10 more years, but not until he's broken. God doesn't give him anybody to train until he's been broken. What broke him? Depression. What broke him? It broke him expectations of other people. I preached what God wanted me to preach. I did what God wanted me to do. I mean, the entire nation of Israel should have turned to God by now. There's no reason for that not to have happened. Lord, I did everything you told me to do. And you didn't come through like you said you would. See, God, even in the Old Testament, he didn't infringe on that free will. And you know what happened? He was so expecting the nation of Israel to do what they said they were going to do. And he found out that the entire nation, not just a few Bible believers, lied to him, didn't do what they said they were going to do. None of them turned back to the Lord that you know. I know there's 7,000 didn't bow the knee to Baal, but not a one of them opened their stinking mouth when he was up there by himself. And the Lord had to remind him, but did you realize until he went under the juniper tree and he went in the cave and until he was broken with failure and with depression, that the Lord said, you know something, now you're really valuable to me. Now you got something to say. Now you got somebody worth following. I'm going to give you a man that's going to do twice the miracles that you did, because you know what? We can learn a lot from a broken vessel. Jeremiah is not half the preacher that he was until he got thrown down in the pit up to his nose, and he's down there, and the old people, the nation of Israel, have turned against him. He's trying to help them. He's trying to do something for them. He's doing his best to help them out, and his heart's broken, and they pitch him down there in the sewer pit, and he's down there about to drown, and a black fella comes down, Ebed-Melech, and gets some ropes and some cast clouts and pulls him up there and hoses him off and gives him something to preach. And you know what he says? I ain't preaching. You ever been there? That's two preachers I've already given you right off the bat. You know what both of them said? I'm done. You know what Elijah said? Kill me. You know what Jeremiah said? I won't open my mouth for you ever again. That's some pretty stern words. You say, what is that? That book that you have in front of you is not only a supernatural book, but it's a book of human nature. And God shows you that no matter how close you are to him, it doesn't relieve you of this thing you carry around with you all the time. And one of the most difficult things in the world is to realize that the more broken I am, the better I'm in God's hands. You spend too much time trying to be whole. Too much time trying to be perfect. Too much time trying to put on the right airs and try to do the right thing. And no problem at all. When's the last time you humbled yourself? I think if I remember correctly, the Bible said that the Lord humbled himself. So then you know what he says to us? Humble ourselves in the sight of God. So you know what that means? That must mean that this thing, pride of who I think I am, what I think I'm doing, what I think I'm accomplishing, how things are going, that must be that thing's with me until the day I put it in the ground or the rapture. I keep coming through that Old Testament, and I see all those old prophets, and there's a continual thing through there where they're all broken down, and they're all look like vagabonds and misfits and outcasts. I look at David. I'm thinking to myself, David, the Lord considers him to be a great king. Is that right? Right? Greatest king that there was, and he'll be a prince in the millennium and a king in eternity. Is that right? You know, I look at David and I think to myself, what made David different than Saul? It was one thing. David would accept the brokenness. Whenever Saul got confronted with sin, you know what Saul said? Well, Lord, now I realize I needed a little bit of your help, but I mean the people and this and that and the other. David said, no, I'm guilty myself. Can I just touch real quickly on something about pride there just for a second? 4 people died as a result of his sin with Bathsheba, and more people preach on David's sin with Bathsheba than they preach on the fact that Satan tempted him with pride, and when David was lifted up in pride, 70,000 men died. You don't think God looks at pride differently than he does adultery? I think the reason that we like to preach on adultery so much is it makes our mind wander sometimes into things that we kind of clean up and put a religious veneer on it, but our mind has a tendency to run in the ditch and maybe even blame the women for what happened. And I look at that thing with David and I think to myself, you know what? He became twice the king after he was broken. I look at Peter. Say what you want about Peter and all the things that he did, walking on water and, you know, get thee behind me, Satan, and you know not what spirit you are, and those kind of things, and not so, Lord, and though everybody else forsakes you, I won't forsake you, Lord. I'll never be like the rest of these jacklegs around here. You can always count on me. And Peter, you better watch and pray. You better watch and pray. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, boy. You better watch it. You better watch it. You better watch it. No, Lord, on me. I won't do it. I'll never desert you. Not me. Not me. I never will. I'm going to be right there with you, Lord. And he's sound asleep, and he said, okay, sleep on. And then he comes out there, he wakes up, and he's grumpy and grouchy and mad and all that stuff. And as you heard Brother Chad say this morning, he grabbed that sword out of there, and he just starts swinging it. You say, what? He's defending himself. He's got a little problem with pride. But boy, what a preacher Peter became after the denial. And he denied him. You want me to show you his brokenness before we get to the passage here? You want me to show you his brokenness? The Lord comes out of there after that beating, boy. I mean, they put a beating on him like nobody's business. They put a beating on him, and they get done with that beating, and the Lord walks out there, and he looks standing out there at that gate, and here's a big old fisherman that's had a couple of little maidens over there and said, aren't you that fisherman? Aren't you the one that knew Jesus? Didn't you know Jesus? I know not this man, and curse and swear, made them little girls run off and cry. And all the Lord did was come out there and look. And the Bible said, and Peter went out as the first time. He wept bitterly. You say, what happened? He was broken. You know what? He was so broken, he thought he was no benefit to the Lord at all. Now think about it for a minute. Somebody's betrayed you the way Peter did. Would you want him on your side anymore? Preacher, you ever have somebody betray you like that? You say, nobody knows how I feel. Well, the Lord does. That's one of his main dudes, man. Peter's the apostle to the to the Jews, man. I mean, he was the guy that the Lord was going to do something with, right? You know what happened to him? He thought he was so worthless and so invaluable and not worth anything at all, he went back to his original occupation. He said, God can't use me. God can't do nothing with me. You say, I'm broken. I have no value at all, man. I'm broken. I've messed up my opportunity. I messed up my chance. I messed up the thing the Lord gave me, the greatest chance I could ever possibly have, and I messed it up. And the Lord's out there, and boys are out fishing, and Pete's out there, and the Lord's out there on the beach, and he's saying, hey, boys, y'all caught anything? Boy, Peter's cursing under his breath. They always ask you that when the box is empty. Who's that up there? What does he know about fishing? He's standing on the cotton-picking beach. Might want to throw your net over on the other side there. And Peter's like, throw your net on the other side. We've been fishing all cotton-picking night long, man. The sun's cracking over the horizon now, man, and the steam's beginning to rise up off of this thing. Man, you got to be kidding me. What in the world? And John said, Peter, you don't recognize that voice? No, I don't recognize that voice. He's not looking for Jesus anymore. He's like some of you tonight. He's broken, and his brokenness makes him think, God could never use me. God couldn't do nothing with me. I've messed up. And John says, Peter, it's the Lord. And Peter goes up there, you know the story, and he comes up there before the Lord. And the Lord doesn't say, Peter, why did you deny me? And who do you think you are? And what is your problem? And I put all this faith and trust in you. And I spent 3.5 cotton-picking years with you. Why, you deadbeat good for nothing. He's like, I met a guy like you once. His name was Elijah. He was pretty broken down too. He needed a little comfort, a little help, a little encouragement, a little bread, and a little water, and some fellowship there. And he said, Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know I love you. Okay, get back on the horse, let's go. I look at the Apostle Paul. You know what the Apostle Paul said? I wasn't worth anything until I got knocked off my horse, and everything I thought I was, I counted it all but dung. And Saul didn't become Paul until after he was broken. He got caught up to the third heaven up there, and the Lord said, I'm going to give you a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet you, lest you be exalted above measure. Well, how would he be exalted? I've been to heaven. I've been up there where Jesus walks around, man. I must be special. After that, the Lord's... Paul lines up, it looks like, with disease in his eyes. His eyes are swollen up, man. Looks like some kind of a bug-eyed raccoon, and he's twisted up and turned up and probably arthritic. And he gets up, man, and he can't even have command of the speech that he had when he was a lawyer. And he's nothing but a broken-down old mule. And he gets up to preach, and he can't get his voice much above a whisper, and the days are gone. And he gets up, man, and God breathes on that broken vessel, and that goes out, and that stuff's still kicking you in the head 2,000 years later. You say, what, broken? Give you one more illustration before we get to our passage here. I think I remember a guy in the Bible. He's a pretty famous fellow there. He comes along there, and the last time he sits down with these fellows here, right after this one here, you know what he does? He breaks some bread, and he says, this is my body, which is broken. There's a song sung. I don't know who wrote the song. I don't know anything about it, but the song's called Broken and Spilled Out. You heard about it today with the oyster. Got to get in there and take all the stuff and pull that thing out of there and rip the roots up and that kind of a deal to be able to get it. You say, what was that? Well, that last illustration is Jesus. Well, if Jesus knows something about being broken because he's not any good unless he is broken, might we consider tonight that? Might you consider that if you were really broken and just considered yourself to be broken and God saw fit to use you in spite of your broken state, might your service for the Lord be different than it is now? And might you not be looking for all the recognition and appreciation and all the other things that you think you're going to get and all the bragging and all the exaltation and stuff? But it's hard, isn't it? It's hard, isn't it? You say, why? Your pride works against you. Who wants to be broken? I remember watching a guy, he's a Southern Baptist guy. He was down at my dad's house one day and down on Caladium Drive, back when my dad was alive, been years ago now. And this guy came in there, and I had run by the house. I was still a policeman in those days, and I run by their house there to get a sandwich or something. And I walked in, and I heard this guy talking to my dad. And he sounded kind of twisted up, and I kind of stuck my head in there, and I thought to myself, man, that guy doesn't even have much command of the English language at all. I mean, he definitely wasn't eloquent in any way, shape, or form, and he's half bawling and half squalling and half crying and half, trying to talk above the squall, and his voice cracking and all this other kind of stuff. And I walked in there, and there's a guy sitting there twisted up like a pretzel, man, and he's sitting there in the couch there in my dad's little family room thing, and my dad's sitting over in the chair here by the fireplace, and he's listening to the guy, and my dad looks up and he said, hey, bud, how are you? And I said, I'm good. I said, I'll come back later. And the guy said, no, I'll go. I said, no, I'll leave, no problem. Y'all got something serious going on. And I walked out and backed out of that thing and got onto the car and went home. And it was several nights later, I come in off the midnight shift one morning. It was a Sunday morning, and I turned on the TV. In those days, you could still get a little bit of good, preaching and stuff. And I'm taking off all the junk and all that kind of a deal. And I'm getting ready to take a little nap there. And I hear a guy on the TV set, man, and he's in there. And it sounds like that guy that was in my dad's living room. And I'm thinking, what in the world, man? So I went in there, and I'm standing there, still got my trousers on and my T-shirt, and I'm looking, and here's this guy, and man, there must have been 4,000 or 5,000 people in that big old church, and big old robed choir up here behind him and stuff, orchestra across the whole front there, and he's up there and he's singing Victory in Jesus. But he's all twisted up, man, and he's spitting all over everything. And I thought, man, what in the world? I know that guy. And all of a sudden he said, stop. Stop. He stopped that whole church. And the cameras just zoom in on him. And he's up there and and I thought, he's out of breath. He's having a stroke, something, man. He said, I got cerebral palsy. What's your problem? Well, preacher, he's just an old Southern Baptist evangelist, and, his doctrine ain't right, and this and that and the other. Could I ask you a question? Just a question. If your vessel was broke up like that, would you still be trying to do something for the Lord? He's preaching to thousands of people. There's nothing wrong with his gospel of salvation that he preached. I mean, I'm independent Baptist. I was raised Southern Baptist. I was Southern Baptist 9 months before I was born. I was Southern Baptist before I was saved. It don't mean nothing to me, but the guy's trying to do something. I looked at that thing and I thought to myself, you know what he was? He was sitting there worried about. He wanted to get married. He wanted to meet a girl. He wanted to have kids. He was talking to my dad and said, will you pray for me? I'm afraid that what I have and what I've been through, that if I have kids, that they'll wind up with this. You think this is hereditary? You think my kids could get it? I wouldn't wish this on anybody, and so on and so forth. I thought to myself, if that had been my lot in life, would I have done anything with it? I'll come to the passage in just a second. I'm just talking about broken things. You say, why? I see it now. I see it. I see is how many missionaries we support and how many times we come watch me preach on the street and be bold and beautiful out there and brash and bang people in the head and, I'm out here with my sign, you're going to hell, and that kind of a deal. Boy, preaching it like a monkey that lost his last banana. Just I hope you go to hell, just so I can prove you right, No tear in your eye, no compassion, no care, and that kind of thing. Like you ain't never had the Lord do nothing for you. But I know what it is. I know the secret now. I know the secret. But it ain't a good secret to know. It ain't a good secret to know. I'm up there in Chattanooga where my dad's church was there, and my dad told me this story. I remember seeing this old woman. That's back in the days of polio. Some of you older fellows will remember this. And back in the days of polio, they would put the vaccine stuff on a little sugar cube and put a drop on it. And then you come by and get your sugar cube, and that would give you that. Or they give you a shot in your arm up here. It was a polio vaccine. Polio was bad in those days. And this woman had gotten polio, and she had those little elbow crutches. I don't remember what you call them, but they're elbow crutches. You lock your arm into them. They had a little C-clamp around them here and little handles on them like that. And she was an ugly woman, old woman, just sort of twisted up. And what made it worse is that she had these braces on her legs, and they were tied off here and here, and then she'd lock those braces in and get her legs like that, and then she would stand up and wobble, and she was all out of balance, and and so she's tried to find herself, and then she would get this one out here, and then she'd take a step like a horse, and get this one here, and then she'd put this one out, and she'd get this one here. I remember as a little kid thinking to myself, man, you got to be kidding me. Would I even be coming to church if I had to deal with all that? Half the time, she couldn't even sit on a pew because her hips and all hurt her so bad. I didn't understand that as a kid. I just thought, man, what an ugly old woman. I know you would never do that, but I did. And I thought, man, somebody help her, like give her a wheelchair or something. It would take her forever to walk somewhere. It was horrible. Now, I was mentioning it one day, and my dad said, oh, I know that, and called her by name just like that. I said, Daddy, what was the deal with her? He said, I'll tell you what the deal with her was. He said, I thought there was a raccoon or something in the sanctuary one day. Big sanctuary, big balcony and all this kind of stuff, about 1,500, 1,800 people sitting there and all that kind of stuff. He said, I thought I heard something out there. And he said, I walked around in there. Sometime the animal get in there. He said, I walked around and real quiet. I'm going to try to sneak up on whatever it was. And he said, and I walked up here to the last two pews in that sort of a slanted sanctuary thing there. And I looked down there, and it was that woman. Feet pointed toward the back of the building, head pointed toward the pulpit. And she looked up and, hey, preacher, Mr. Ed lets me in here. He said it was okay. And he said, well, what are you doing? And she held up a putty knife and a mason jar. And she said, preacher, I'm just doing what I can do. I'm scraping the chewing gum off the bottom of the pews. And and she had about a quarter of that mason jar full of people's chewing gum on the bottom of the pew. She said, preacher, in a month I about make myself around the whole church, but I have to leave my crutches and I just slide on my back underneath the pews. In those days, the churches would have carpet down the aisleways and it'd be vacant underneath the bottom for acoustics. And she said, I slid under there. She said, preacher, I can't do nothing else. You mean God used a broken vessel like that? You know what'll happen? You get up there to heaven. You'll be at the judgment seat. The Lord will take the mason jars full of chewing gum. And before they can hit that frozen firmament up there, there'll be gold, silver, and precious stones poured out there like that. And that woman will be standing just as straight as she can possibly be standing. And the Lord said, boy, you should be surprised what I can do with a broken vessel. But boy, we don't like being broken. Romans chapter 12, I'll quote it. Then we're going to look at this passage here in the book of Mark. He says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, watch it carefully, that you present your body a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. You may know that which is good, acceptable, perfect will of God, and so on and so forth he goes. So in this passage right here, I find an anomaly. Years ago, when I was a detective, a bajillion years ago now, we sometimes had serial crimes. I had to work a few of those, and in the division that I was in, when it had to do with a serial rapist or a serial pedophile and those things, there's certain things that you do in order to try to catch them. They have methods of operation, and they have certain things that they do that they can't seem to deviate from. Even no matter how smart they think they are, they leave a little trail of breadcrumbs. And you get a big old huge whiteboard there, or chalkboard back in those days, or a big bunch of paper, and you put it up across here, and you start having somebody read you cases, and you start writing down the information of the cases. And you write them down, and you write them down, and you write them down, and you write them down. And then what you do is you go back through and you circle and you go, okay, I see this is in common with this, and this is in common here, and this is in common here. And you begin to pick up things that are traits of this criminal. Well, I found something here that seemed to have got the Lord's attention more than most things. Those individuals I told you about in the Old Testament, folks, I mean, you got to admit, those are great men. Where's their memorial? There's not one. Boys, guess what? There's only one memorial in the entire Bible. You know who it's to? It's to a woman. But there's something unusual about her that is different from everyone else. So much so that the Lord sees fit in the passage we're going to read here to make a memorial to her. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. Look in verse number 3. 14:3, and being in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, he sat at meat, and came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment, of spikenard, of spikenard, very precious. And she opened the box and poured it on his head. She broke the seal because we got to hold on to the box. No, look at what it says in the passage. She brake not the seal on the box, the box. the thing that was preventing the spikenard on the inside from getting out, she didn't do like a lot of Baptists and take it off and pour out 10%. And she had an opportunity here to anoint the Lord before he died. You know, an odd thing that you might want to consider is that when they came to anoint the body of the Lord after the crucifixion, she's not with them. You know why? She'd already anointed him while he was still alive. She comes up there and she shatters that box, and notice what the Bible says, and poured it on his head. Verse number 4, and there were some that had indignation within themselves, and why was this waste of ointment made? And verse number 5, they murmured against her. And Jesus said in the original Greek, shut up. You're a bunch of pinheads. She had wrought a good work, not for me, on me. She made him look good. For you have the poor with you always, and whensoever you may do them good. But you have not, notice there's a timeline, but me you have not always. Watch, she hath done, what's it say? Then the Lord goes on, you know what he says? Let this be a memorial unto her, that wherever the gospel's preached. Now, I know what that gospel is and so on and so forth, but can I say this? The way of salvation, whenever it was preached, you know what he said? Right up there with that is what this woman did, because there is a principle here that we often run by so quick, especially in our male-dominant behavior in the Bible-believing crowd, that we want to brush off what she did that we hadn't had the guts to do. If Jesus saw fit to break himself, why shouldn't we be willing to be broken? If Jesus kept his pride in tow and tamed it, then why shouldn't we be able to do that? You're just talking about a broken vessel. You imagine, if you would, for a moment, that they're having a men's meeting. It's not like today where if a woman walked in, you'd be careful to make sure that nobody got offended or upset. You'd let her come in and interrupt and, you know, bring coffee or tea or bring in a notepad or whatever it might be, and we'd be real careful to be unoffended. But in those days, for a woman to walk into a men's meeting, that was unheard of. And she walks into that men's meeting there, and the guys turn around and they look at her, and you need to be aware of this before we get to the end of the message, that if you choose to do something with what I'm going to try my best with the Lord's help to show you tonight, I can promise you, you're going to stir up the people sitting at the table. Because their pride and their jealousy and their envy is going to make them hate you because you did something they're not willing to do. I don't know about you, but I'd like to have the Lord step in sometimes and defend me. There have been some times I wished he would, and he didn't. I wonder sometimes if we miss this because we have preconceived notions that what God's interested in is taking us the way we are, because there's really nothing wrong with us after we're saved, right? We're pretty much perfect. Yet the missing element is where we're headed tonight. I remember an old woman sitting in Chattanooga. I think I told this story here several years ago. Sitting way back up in the back, underneath a little balcony overhang there. Name was Miss Lovelady. My dad was preaching one day, and I don't know what he was preaching on. I was a kid, man. I didn't half pay attention in those days like I should have. And all of a sudden, while he's preaching, she just jumps up. And she starts singing down the aisleway. She looked like a skeleton with just skin draped over it. She's in her 90s. I remember that. She came down that aisle over there, and she started walking down that aisle. I'm sitting over here on the side, and I'm watching her. And I didn't really know what it was. At first, I thought somebody was like playing a bagpipe or a flutophone or something, because it was just so like off-key, like styrofoam lids. And she's coming down there. She's got both of them hands up like this. I can see her now. She's about that big around. I mean, she looked like a scarecrow out over a cornfield, man. I mean, clothes too big for her. White hair, white as my shirt. little tiny bob or ponytail thing. I can see that. And she's singing, I am satisfied, I am satisfied, I am satisfied with Jesus. And then she'd repeat it. And about half, 3/4 of the way down that side, those couple of deacons got up and they were going to get her and get her under control. And I remember my dad hitting the pulpit so hard that he broke the glass on the pulpit, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like, man, I like that, man. It's like Samson in the pulpit's been turned loose, you know. He hit that pulpit and he said, let her alone. Be good for some of you to get what she's got. And he just sat down. You say, what did he do? Well, I know women can't preach, but boy, was she preaching. I found out later on when I talked to my dad about that old woman. I said, Dad, who was that woman that did that like that? He said, boy, let me tell you about that woman. She's buried her husband. She's buried all of her kids. She has no family. The only thing she has is to come sit in church. And all you know about her is what you see back there then. But what you don't know is that she's been here over 50 years in the same spot. You say, what is that? That was a broken vessel. Still able to say, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with Jesus. Mary comes into that room over there, and they look back in the very back there, and they're watching the doors. And you know how it is, like when you walk into a church time, you walk in late, and they open up the doors, and everybody turns around and looks back there. And they're looking at you, and then when they see you, you know, they're like, they don't want you to sit next to them. I came into a big meeting where my dad was one time. I had moved out of the house, and he asked me to meet him. I came in and I had on a lime green shirt and plaid bell-bottom pants. I had on blue suede shoes. I mean, if you gave me a hat with a feather, I'd look like a pimp, man. And I'd been working out a little bit, and I was a pretty good sized fellow and stuff like that. And I had on a shirt that was about 3 sizes too small. You know, make you look like you're really buff, you know. And I came walking in, and as I started walking down the aisle, the deacon's walking me down there like he's going to find me a seat. People are sliding over like, you know, I don't want him sitting there. A big old long Fu Manchu man, and my hair had gotten a little long, you know. I remember looking up there on the platform, and I saw my dad look at me. He had glaucoma, and I saw him kind of squinting and looking, and then all of a sudden he recognized me. And he got up and he started down there, and to the people's horror in that church, there must have been 1,500 people in that place. He came walking down, and I got about halfway down, and I thought, I just got to tell you, I thought, oh boy, here we go. Probably grabbed me by the nape of the neck and the britches and throw me out of here, you know. He threw his arms around me, and he said, boy, it sure is good to see you. He asked me something you would never even think that. He said, you been working out? Yeah, Dad, I've been sure have, you know. Yeah, man, you look real good, you know. Sat me down on the front row. After church, we went and got something to eat. He knew I was as messed up as a soup sandwich. I wasn't doing bad stuff. I was just out of fellowship with the Lord. I mean, just a wreck. I used church people as my excuse, but that wasn't the truth. The problem was me. It wasn't the church people. Church people weren't bad to me. I mean, I'm talking church people like Herbie. Herbie would love anybody. Herbie loved me. Herbie, old knock-kneed, twisted up, you know, thumbs turned in and that kind of a deal. And Herbie, I love you. Well, I sit there and that kind of a deal, and I'm thinking, okay, so we get out and get ready to get something to eat, and I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it. When we get done, he reaches in the back part of that wallet, and he pulls out a folded up $100 bill, and he grabs the check, and then he slides that $100 bill across that table, and he says, I thought you could use that, bud. I said, oh no, Daddy, I'm flush, man. Well, okay, just in case. Well, okay then, you know. Here's what I'm trying to say. My dad realized that I had moved out and I was on my own, and my dad recognized it wasn't his job to break my vessel. I am ashamed to say that I spent a lot of time trying to be God's sledgehammer and do something that even God himself won't do unless he has a willing participant. And too long I thought I was the one that's supposed to break the vessel, when I realized that I'm robbing them of the blessing or the privilege of breaking their own vessel. Within 6 weeks of that meeting right there, I'm in the academy. All the hair's gone, all the facial hair's gone. The bell bottoms went the way of the American Indian. They were so bad, man, I didn't even take them to turn them into somebody and get a tax write-off, man. I threw all that stuff in a garbage bag and threw it out in the dumpster and never seen it again. But I've thought about that story oftentimes. What if he'd have worried more about keeping his reputation intact instead of letting God work on me? Because, sometimes if the vessel isn't broken already, then it does everything it can to defend its reputation in front of all those people. You know what I saw? I saw a broken vessel. You say, was it you? No, it was the man hugging me. You say, what? He didn't care what them people thought. He said, that's my boy. I've been praying for him. I'm glad he's in church. Some people are probably in there thinking, my God, man, what are you going to do with that guy? So I don't know what God's going to do with him, but I'm glad he's here. I wondered sometimes, preacher, if he'd have dropped the hammer on me, whether I'd be where I'm at right now. You say, why didn't he? He was broken. That old man, or he was old to me at the time, died when he was 64 years old. He'd had bypass surgery about 11 years earlier than that, and they gave him blood that was tainted with hepatitis C, and it ate up all of his internal organs, and because his liver was in such bad shape, even at his age, they wouldn't give him a liver. And so it watched him as he passed from this life to the next life. 64 years of age, one of the greatest preachers you've ever heard, pastored real large churches, left the big church over in Panama City and went out on the road and went to little tiny churches all over the creation, man, for almost 25 years, and never money trouble, never woman trouble, never any of those other kind of things. And then the Lord saw fit to take him out of here at 64 years of age. You say, well, how do you make sense of that? He was a broken vessel. He was, God, do with me whatever you want to do with me. Gave up professional baseball. Why give up professional baseball? Why don't you play a couple of years and then get a good retirement account, and get a name in the paper and that kind of a deal, and what do you want to do that for? And then as soon as he gives up professional baseball, you can say, what happened to him? They get ready to have the first baby, and the doctor comes in drunken and squishes the baby's head with forceps, and 2 days and 2 nights later, the baby's dead. That's the reward you get? Boy, if his vessel wasn't broken, boy, he'd be mad at God and shake his fist out there and say, if that's what you're going to do, I'm out of here. But when you understand what I'm trying to tell you tonight, you know what happens? You start realizing a little more about that verse. All things work together for good to them that love God. But you don't really know that you love him until he allows something to happen in your life that ain't what you wanted. And unless your vessel is broken, you know what you do? You push up against it. I don't like it. How are you doing this to me? Or say, well, I was broken for you. I just figured maybe you could be broken for me. It'd be all right with you, if take your life and do with it what I want. Absolutely, Lord. But here's the precursors and the prenup. There's the parameters that you work in. I'm not trying to be hard on you. I'm trying to give you a principle. Trying to give you something to think about. I've seen people broken in salvation. I've seen God using their destructive lives. And the old preacher is down in Orlando preaching in Orange County there, and he preached the crucifixion to about 70 or 80 women there, jammed in that place like sardines. I remember looking at some of them women in there, and they were in their early 20s and some of them in their late teens and all that. And I know some of you have seen all that stuff, and they're in there, and I'm watching on the back row. It's so crowded. I'm standing up against the very back of that thing, and the preacher's up there drawing the crucifixion. He turned around every now and then and said, "Now, ladies, if you never had a man love you the way he ought to love you," he said, "let me introduce you to this man right here." And then he bragged on Jesus for a while. There was a black lady that said, "Oh, Lord, I believe I'd like to meet him." And he said, "Well, I can introduce you." He never missed a beat. He said, "I can introduce you to him right now." She said, "You mean he won't never cheat on you?" He said, "He won't never cheat on you. He'll always love you. He'll never leave you. He'll never." She said, "Ooh, preacher, introduce me to him." We get down to the end of that thing, man, and getting good in there, just getting good, man. It is so quiet in there, boy, you could hear a pin hit that terrazzo floor in there. And he turns around and he leans down on that thing, grabs the edge of that chalkboard, and he goes down like he did so many times, and he's leaning there, and he goes down on a bad hip and bad ankle, and he gets ready to pray, and man, he starts to pray, and them girls are praying, and I'm thinking, I'm watching this kid in the back there. She's about 19 years old. She looks like she's at least 35 or 40. I mean, boy, sin and roughshod hooves have stomped all over her face, man. I mean, she's got every kind of thing. Skin poppers, black burnt popcorn teeth from meth. I mean, man, stunk like you can't imagine. Gooey stuff coming out of her while she's sitting there sweating. And I'm sitting there watching her, and I began to watch as he was beginning to draw, and by your stripes you're healed, and he's putting the stripes on the Lord, and he says he can clean you up, and so on and so forth, and them tears start coming. Boy, I mean, crashing down her cheeks like a rain running down the side of a mountain after a spring rain, Ben. I can see those things hitting, and they hit the plastic edge of the pew and then fall onto that floor and just splatter, like just splatter. Just a little tiny puddle, about that big around, just a little puddle right there of tears. And I thought, oh, boy, she's going to get in. Boy, she's going to get in. Oh, boy, it's going to be something, man. It's going to be life-changing for her, boy. She's going to be like that fellow we met that time, we felt sorry. He was in prison. He said, "Oh, no, preacher, don't be sorry for me." He said, "I had to get in here to get out." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'd have never met Jesus if I hadn't got in here." I said, "It's going to be one of them stories. It's going to be one of them stories." And they got finished with that thing. He got done, and he was giving some of the girls to give testimonies. It's the first time you've ever trusted Jesus Christ and all that, and I'm waiting for her. She never opened her mouth. And I thought, well, maybe she's either saved or she just didn't get saved. And she never said nothing, just sat there and cried. That little old lip quivering. You know how them babies will cry sometimes, and then they get where they can't cry no more, and that little lip goes. It's pitiful, man. It makes you feel terrible. And so I'm watching, and she gets up, and they're calling count, and they're getting ready to go out, and I'm rolling up the picture like this. There's big fluorescent lights over you, and I'm rolling up the picture there, and I feel a shadow come up over the top of me. And I turned around and I looked up at her like that, and it's that girl. And she said, please don't hurt him. I said, "Oh, sister, he's not here. He's up in heaven now. He ever lived to make intercession for you." And she looked at me kind of strange, and I said, "He died for you. He died for me, but he's not here anymore. He's dead, buried, risen, like I heard the preacher say." You heard the preacher say that. I said, "He can wash you white as snow." She said, "He can't clean me up." And I said, give him a little bit of Isaiah there. "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as wool. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as snow." And she said, "He can't clean me up. You don't know what I've done." I said, "I don't have to know what you did." I said, "Why don't you let me introduce you to him?" Real good chaplain over there, a female named Westmoreland. She'd been there 30 years with those women. And so I called her. I said, "Chaplain, I believe she wants to talk to you." They sat down on the front row. And I finished rolling up the stuff, getting the chalk together, getting everything ready to go, and getting stuff packed up and getting ready to walk out the door and stuff like that. And next thing I know, that little girl's sitting there on the side of that bench, and she slides off there, and that old chaplain slides off next to her, and they get down on their knees, and they start praying and stuff like that. And she gets up, and about that time, those doors crack open in the back, and a big correctional officer comes in there, a big female comes in, and "Count!" And she calls the girl by name. "You're late for count." The chaplain said, "I got her. I got her. I'll bring her to you." "She's late, chaplain. She's late." The chaplain said, "I'll bring her to you right now." So you can't go this way. You have to go a certain way. And so she starts going down there. Well, she got all the way on the side of the building over there. And I just said, hey, let me ask you a quick question. She said, "I can't go." I said, "No, I'll just ask you a quick question." She said, "What's that?" She's walking. And I said, "Did you get things settled?" You know what she said to me? I'll never forget it. You know what she said to me? She said, I'm clean now. You say, what's the value of that? She was broken all to pieces by sin. That's the greatest thing that ever happened to her. You say, why? Because until she was at the end of herself, she never got far enough down to realize I need somebody to help me. She was broken all to pieces. Didn't change her sentence. She still had skin poppers on her. She didn't get new teeth. Still, her hair was just matted together, looked like a mangy dog. But you say, what? Well, that countenance was different. I'm clean now. I'm whole now. I'm different now. What are you talking about, preacher? Broken vessel. You ever been broken? You ever been mad because you're broken? Death, divorce, disease. I watched old Monroe man, bigger than I am, big man, strong as a bull. We used to call him bulletproof. I watched when he got sick, man, and he went into the hospital and could barely breathe, and he got to where he would text me, or I'd talk to him after they put him on the paralytics and put him on the thing. I'd talk to him. The doctors would come in and say to me, he'd say, okay, listen, man, we're going to step out. He said, you just take your time with him, preacher, and all that kind of stuff. And I'd talk to my best friend for sometimes an hour, just talk to him. He couldn't do nothing but let that stinking machine breathe for him. And I watched him go from a big old hulk of a man as he began to just drain down and drain down and drain down and whittle down. And I watched vessels all around him. You say, well, what happened? Well, you know what he had told me years ago? This is the same guy that held me up against the wall by the throat and told me, I don't want to hear nothing more about your Jesus. And he got saved and was coming to church out there. And he said, you know, one day he said, I'm gonna do what I can to get a bunch of those knot-headed policemen to come to church. Right before he went away, you know what he said? He said, I guess I'm going to keep my promise. There's the sheriff. There's all my old gang. That place looked like a sea of blue. Tan and green, policemen from all over. Have a full honors police funeral, and that place is packed out as far as you can see with nothing but policemen. Over 600 of them come by for his viewing, for his wake. I'm standing on one end down here and others on down here, and they're coming by. I knew nearly every single one of them. You say, what was that? They came to see a broken vessel. That broken vessel brought a whole bunch of people in and allowed them to be able to hear the gospel. Are you beginning to see the value of a broken vessel? You see, if you're broken, you're more valuable than you are if you're whole. That's an oxymoron, right? It's twisted. It doesn't make sense. It don't sound right. You're broken and you're more valuable. Well, let's see if we can get into the story here. We'll be finished with it here just shortly. Look what he says there in the passage. As she begins to come in, the Bible says, you know what? They despised her. Isn't that what it says? They hated her. But it didn't stop her. It said they spoke vehemently against her. It wasn't just Judas. It was Peter, James, John, Matthew, Dr. Luke. What in the cat hair are you doing in a men's meeting? Reckon why she didn't say to them something you ain't going to do. She'd been at the house. I hadn't forgot that part. She's looking up around the house. She knows the Lord's going to be there. You know, she's thinking, it took some planning. You know, she's thinking, I wonder what I could do for him. What can I do? I'm a woman. I can't preach. I can't teach a Sunday school class. There ain't no Sunday school class. What can I do for Jesus? She looks up on that shelf. There's a alabaster box up there, hard stone box up there. Contains a very costly I might even say this, her retirement account. See, that's her insurance against her and her sister being taken by somebody. If Lazarus died, there'd be nobody to take care of her, so she'd have enough money to support herself so that she didn't have to be with some man she didn't want. And she looks at that and she said, well, I could give him that. You got to remember that it says in there, the poor you have always among you, but me you don't have so long. You say, why? Sometimes these opportunities to be broken, they come by. You know what? They don't come by another time. She had a chance. She grabbed that thing down, probably blew the dust off. She said, yeah, that'll work. She probably hid it in her tunic or in her cloak there, and she went over there, and she's waiting. Martha's in the kitchen working up a fever, man. She's putting on the tater salad and the lamb stew, and she's getting all the pita bread ready, and she's doing all that other kind of stuff. She throws flour in her face to make sure everybody knows how busy she is and stuff, and she's out there. And here's Mary out there, and she's like, Mary, get in the cotton picking kitchen. And Mary's like, I'll be there in a minute, sis, just a minute. She's, what are you doing? I'll be there in a minute. She goes to grab the door handle. If I could paint, I'd make those hinges creak and have a little bubble up there and make that noise like that. And when she pulled it, Martha goes, oh my Lord, have I not taught that girl anything? We're supposed to be serving food. We got to get the kitchen cleaned up. We got to get stocked for tomorrow. We got all these things to do. She's going into the... Mary, it's a men's meeting. The boys are in there. You can't go in there. You're not welcome. They're all sitting at the table. Mary comes in. As soon as them boys see that she doesn't have a tray with a glass of tea on it or some biscuits or cookies for them, they're like, what are you doing in here? She hadn't taken her eyes off the one at the head of the table. And she's walking, and now she's pulled out that box. And she's looking at the box, and then she's looking at him, and she's kind of tentatively thinking, any minute, man, they could kick me out of here. I hope he lets me get to him. I got something I want to give him. There's something I want to do for him. I've been thinking about this a long time. I got him something special. I sure hope he likes it. I sure hope he likes it. After all he's done for me, I sure hope he likes this. You get up there, and now they're murmuring. And with the strength of Samson, her little old fingers just crush that box, and she loses all control of that spikenard inside, and it starts at his head and just runs all over him to his feet. Changes the entire atmosphere. It don't smell like biscuits and lamb anymore. It smells like perfume. And I believe when Jesus got up and walked away, he said, man, what's that smell? Well, Mary busted a box of spikenard on him. He smelled like that all the way to Calvary. Yeah. Oh, preacher, okay, well, I'm painting the story, but man, what is that? Mary, oh, you hadn't heard the story? Yeah, man, she took her 401k and dumped the whole thing on him. What an idiot, Why don't you save it, because at least if he's dead, you can just give him a little bit of it. He won't never know the difference. No, she had to go in and jump the gun and bust the whole thing over him. And she's down on her hands and knees now, and she's got her hair, and it's uncommon in those days for her to take her hair down in front of men especially. She's taken what God gave her for her glory, and she's saying, my glory is nothing around you, and she's wiping his feet right there by the floor and probably saying, I sure am grateful for these feet that saw fit to come by my way. And the people have indignation against her. And the Lord said, let her alone. She's done what she could. And then he makes a memorial, and I'm almost done. To what? To Mary. Because of the box? No, because she did what she could. The box is representative of us. We're the hard shell on the outside. We are saved. and he wants out. And we want to be able to do something for him, but sometimes he can't get past that hard shell. Hard shell Baptists are not gone the way of the American Indian, and I'm not talking about them being Calvinist and all that other stuff. I mean, we have a lot of hard shell Baptists today. We have a lot of hard shell saved people today. You know why? Because, man, that pride gets in the way, and that pride does not like to be broken. We can't be twisted up like a Herbie or a David Ring, and we can't be like a crippled woman who scrapes chewing gum from underneath the pews, just doing what she can. You know, we don't mind doing it if we can sing a song or preach a sermon, teach a class, you know, use our skills for the Lord. But have you ever considered this? Mary just broke the box, and that got the Lord's attention. I don't know about you, but I could use the Lord's attention tonight. I could use the Lord to turn and look at me a little bit. You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to make him look good for a change. Nothing makes him look better than a broken box. I was talking to an old woman one time, and she's what do you call those pottery people, the ceramics. She made ceramics. And I asked her, I said, you know, what do you do when you get a thing that's broken and all that? And she said, well, sometimes you can grind them up and add water and you can remake things and like that. She said, but you know, I've found some of the best stuff that I ever have had is things that have been broken and then you put them back together. She said, but you know, they're never really the same. And she said this, she said, you think you've glued it up and it's seamed up and sealed shut until you put a flashlight or a candle on the inside. And then you realize that once it was broken, it don't ever look the same because that light will shine through. All you do is turn the lights off and put the light down in there. And she said, what you thought was perfectly whole, it really cracked all to pieces. She said, you know what I sell more of than I sell of the full whole things? She said, I sell those cracked pieces. People consider them to be vintage. And she said this, the lights always seem better through cracks than it is through a whole jar. You ever thank God for your cracks? You ever thank God for your broken vessel? For your busted family? Your busted marriage? Kids gone prodigal? You ever thank God and say, Lord, thank you. I sure am glad. I hope this makes you look good. I hope the way I weather this cancer, or I weather this disease, or I weather this old age, or I weather this church problem, I sure hope, Lord, that all I do is come out with a bunch of cracks so that it makes you look good. So when the light shines, they can see you and me. I wondered about this as I'm going through the passage and preparing it. I have done it before, but you know what I see? I see people on a regular basis that are successful in what I call the Christian life. And they're able to accept the fact that it's good for them to be broken. And they don't magnify their brokenness. That's just pride. I've been more broken than you are, like Brother Dennis said, but you get weird. Like, you know, I'm more broken. No, I'm not. I'm more broken. And then you run out in front of a truck. See, now I'm more broken. Okay, now we're going to compete on who's the weirdest, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about God will allow you to go through a process, but then you come to a point where the Lord said, how about it? Would you be willing to be broken? Not, Lord, make me willing to be willing. That's sadistic. That's, Lord, you do something I don't want to do. No. That ain't how it works. Watch. Nevertheless, not my will, but the breaking started in Gethsemane. And for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. You know what you see in all the lash marks on Jesus? You see the light shining through. You know what you see in the holes in his hands and the crown of thorns around his head, leaving holes and holes in his feet and holes in his eyes. You see the light coming through. He's just a vessel. He didn't come down here and riding a white horse and throw everybody off the throne. He came down here. You know what he said? I'm willing to die. The epitome of a broken vessel. Wasn't that interesting? I think if I remember my Bible right, in the Pauline epistles, I think Paul said, I die daily. Paul knew something about it. You know what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12, and I'm done? Paul said, the Lord gave me a messenger from Satan, a thorn in the flesh. He said, but then he gave me with that, for I know when I'm weak, he is strong. I will therefore glory in tribulation and in persecutions. Why? Because Paul said, I'm nothing but a busted vessel anyway. And if I learn to do that, that means God can really use me because it's about him. Pride said it's about me. That's the devil. So here's the missing ingredient. It took me 15 or 20 minutes to tell you the story. We need our box broken. But he's not going to break it. He didn't grab that box out of Mary's hand and shatter it. Mary broke that box. You know what he gave you an opportunity to do? Break your own box. But you have to be willing to do it. Would you break your box? I don't know. Lord might break your box and say, depend on me and don't depend on work. That's hard to do. Would you agree? Lord might say to you, I know you got a career ahead of you, but I want you to go to Bible school. Lord, can I finish and get my retirement? And can I do this? And can I do that? And then maybe I'll have some time for Bible school. The Lord might tell you, I need you over here. Would you be willing to go? Lord, that's a mission field. You want me to go? Man, I mean, I'm up in my 60s now. Why would you call me? Well, just give you an opportunity to break your will, your desires, what you want to do, how you got it drawn up, the way you got it mapped out. Put your impatience on the altar and say, Lord, I'm busting it. If you want me to sit here and hang out here forever till you come, then I'll sit right here. And if you want me to go, I'll go. But Lord, I'm not my own anymore. And the Lord said, you smell that? You smell that? It ain't flesh burning. You say, what is that? Michael, come here a minute. Come here. Gabriel, come here. Let me show you something, man. Look down there, man. Look down there at little old church, Victory Baptist Church. Some idiot from Florida down there. Look at that. Look at that. There's a couple of individuals down there. You smell that? Hey, Mary, come here just a minute. She'll be up there now. Yeah, yes, sir, Lord. Notice anything unusual there? Yes, sir, Lord. I gotta go, Lord. No, I want you to see something, Mary. I had him preach your story tonight because there's a principle. And look, some of them are getting it. They're breaking their box because you already heard tonight. You're the house. You're the treasure. You're where the earthen vessel dwells. You're the earthen vessel where he's at right now. You know what he wants? He wants to get out. But he wants to get out before the rapture. But if you want to build a wall, he'll stay right there. But if you want to do something, the secret, the key, not my will, thine be done. It's total surrender. Everything I got's busted, Lord. You do whatever you want to do. Rewrite the plan for my life. You can have it. Take my life, let it be. Consecrated, Lord, to not me, to thee. As your bowed eyes are closed, as you think about Mary and think about whether or not maybe you're in that situation where you're busted